we get into the meeting, I'd just like to make a few announcements. First of all, welcome to residents who have attended the meeting, and also any residents who may be following us online. This planning committees are captured on the web. The camera is this little dome bit in front of you. The cameras are facing this way, so sitting in the public gallery, you're not on screen. However, when you do come, anybody who speaks at the petition table, you will be seen and your voice will be captured. So all welcome to anybody who's following us online. Fire alarms. We're not expecting one this evening. If it does sound, we will evacuate immediately. The fire exits, the best way is the way you came in. However, to get out from the stairways here, if you go through the double doors directly in front of you and down the circular stairs, that is the quickest and easy way. If those fire exits are blocked for whatever reason, there are fire exits behind us. Don't worry, there's loads of us here who are very familiar with the building, and we will escort you and make sure you're out safely. Mobile devices, can I please ask that everybody turns their mobile device to silent? Residents' feedback forms. Those forms are provided on the seats for you to complete. We do encourage it. It does help us to improve the way we run the meetings. Your comments are fed into our democratic services. They don't come to me or committee members. So please be open and honest with your feedback. We have a reasonably long agenda, number of petition items. It will take us a little while to get into it. And I'll just give a couple of minutes about how the committee will run this evening. First of all, I'll introduce you to the people sitting around the table. There are a lot of us. You'll wonder who we all are and what we're all doing. Now, the committee itself is made up of councillors, members of the council. And on my far right-hand side, I'll introduce you to Councillor Yarrow, Councillor Ahmed Walana, Councillor Chamdal, Councillor Chapman, and Councillor Lavery. On my far left-hand side, Councillor Morse, Councillor Money, and Councillor Kashid. They're the voting members. As chair, I am also a councillor, and I will vote in the event that there is tie. Okay. Now, the other people around the table are officer support. On my far left-hand side, Glenn Egan, Legal Services. Liz Penny, Democratic Services, minutes of the meeting. James Rogers, Head of Planning, will give planning advice as required. Mandit Malhotra will be presenting each of the applications and will also give planning advice. Man Mohan Ranger is a transport officer and will give us any information required around transport, traffic and highways. So that's the team. It is a meeting in public, not a public meeting, so it means that there aren't general speaking rights. So I am very sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I need you not to say anything to contribute to the meeting unless you are a petitioner or speaking as the petitioner or in response to the petition. And when we get to that stage, I'll talk about it. You'll also hear when we get into the formal bit, a bit about part one and part two of the meeting. Part one of the meeting are all the applications, and they're the bits that you're interested in. These are the bits that we will discuss in public. And you're welcome to sit and remain throughout the whole of the meeting until the close of part one. Part two is when we meet in private, and we're discussing matters around enforcement. And the reason we discuss those in private is that it could result in enforcement and potentially prosecutions, and therefore those sorts of discussions are outside of the public domain. However, the topic and the outcome of those discussions are published. So there will be a break between part one and part two when I will ask members to leave the room and we break the video link. Okay, so there's no shortcut way of seeing part two, unfortunately. We'll dance through a little bit of the agenda. Don't be too disheartened that it's agenda item 6 before we get into the business, because the rest of it is pretty fast. Okay, so if I may please, apologies for absence.
We've received apologies from Councillor Stead, and we have Councillor Lavery substituting.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest matters coming before the committee this evening. Councillor Yarrow.
Thank you, Chairman. The petitioner for item 8 made himself known to me at a NORA, North Uxbridge Residents Association meeting. No conversation took place. I shall remain in the room and will be voting.
Thank you very much. Any other matters of interest? No? Okay, item 3, we're signing minutes, agreeing and signing minutes of the meeting of the 10th of October. Thank you very much. Item 4, matters that have been notified in advance or urgent. There are none. Item 5, I am confirming there are parts 1 and parts 2 to this meeting. So we're now into item 6. That quickly. And we're now through to number 7, Abbott's Close, Cowley. Find it.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to try and make this work. And it's not working. Have I not pushed it on?
I have no idea. Please excuse us for this, colleagues. We should be checking these before we start. Please, if you wish to present and then come back to the slides, that's helpful. Let's crack on. Thank you. We're now working by the looks.
Excellent. Agenda item 6 is 7 Abbott's Close. Members should be made aware that there is an addendum sheet on agenda item number 6. It provides some additional clarification from the Council's HMO officer. So it's available to view. I can go through it in further detail if necessary. I'll take you through the application. The application site has a lawful use for a HMO. The property is number 7. The property is number 7, Abbott's Close. It's highlighted in red here. And it is within the Article 4 area. And that was an Article 4 that was adopted some time ago, which restricts houses of multiple occupation in this area. However, this HMO has been licensed and registered since 2001 and therefore predates the Council's Article 4. The property is therefore, for the purposes of determining this application, is a dwelling house, so a C3 use, not a HMO. The proposal is therefore a single-storey rear extension to provide this rear extension that you can see before you, so it's easier to demonstrate on this plan. The property at number 7 is highlighted in orange, and the extension proposed is 4 metres by 6.6 metres and is only a ground floor level. The extension measures 3 metres in height, as you can see from these plans here. The pointer isn't working, but the elevation does show that it is compliant in terms of its height at 3 metres. The size and scale is sympathetic to the design and appearance and integrates with the appearance of the host dwelling. The property itself would now provide 5 letting rooms, so it's still within the site's permitted development rights as a dwelling house to operate as a HMO for less than 6 persons. It's appreciated that this has raised some concerns about its occupancy, but under the permitted development, a property can be occupied by up to 6 persons, and we've proposed a condition as part of the addendum to restrict the number of persons to 6. Any more than 6 persons would require planning permission for the change of use of this property from a dwelling house to a HMO, which is not permitted development. It also allows the council to take enforcement action if it's considered by residents living locally that there are more than 6 occupants at the premises. Accordingly, the application is recommended for approval. I can take you through some photos. This is the front of the property. There is sufficient space for up to 3 vehicles, and that would accord with the parking standards for a HMO for this size. Sorry. This is the back garden. The shed you can see on the left is proposed to be demolished to make way for the extension. The 2 doors, which currently are blocked up on the rear elevation, would be replaced by the location of the new extension. And I'll pass this back to the chairman. Thank you.
If
if need be, we can manually move through slides via the laptop over there, Chairman.
Have you completed all the slides, though? You have. That's fine. Thank you very much. Just before we get to the petitioner, just like one clarification. You said in your presentation, and you show on the site plan, a 4 metre by 6.6 metre extension, and that's what you quoted. However, the report talks about a 3.6 metre by 6.6 metre, and the plans are shown for 3.6. So we confirm that it is 3.6 by 6, not 4 by 6.6.
Apologies, that was an error. It is 3.6 metres deep and 6.6 metres in width.
Okay, thank you. So the site layout one is indicative and it doesn't form part of the approval. And we take questions afterwards, if you mind, because we need to get into the petitioners. Okay, it's an opposite question. Okay, thank you very much. We'll just take that.
We can strike that from the approval of plans as part of the minutes and actions.
Thank you. Okay, now a valid petition has been submitted, although I have no details of the organiser or petitioner. So if the organiser or petitioner number 7 Abbott's Close is here and wishes to speak, would they please make themselves known? Okay. My understanding is that the applicant or agent, Mr. Baines or Mrs. Thufa, are present. You wish to speak. You're entitled to. Thank you. If one of you wishes to come forward, you can both come forward, that's fine, but it's 5 minutes speaking rights between you, okay? Now, I'll just tell you a little bit about how we do this. Before us, you'll see some lights. You have speaking time 4 minutes with a green light, 1 minute with the amber light. When the red comes up, I must stop you, even if you haven't completed your presentation. You only have the 5 minutes. In front of you, you'll find a microphone, and on the stand there's a button. Just toggle on and off button for turning the microphone on. The red light comes on and you know you're live. We need that, otherwise we can't record what is being said and we can't properly hear you. Okay, so you have an opportunity now to present for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, so yeah, the property is basically a HMO licence which we have presented within the process, and I think the main issue with the petition was that it was not HMO licensed, so it is, so that's one of our first points. There was one other thing within the report where it was suggested that the closest property to us is actually 31 inches, but we've kept it at 900mm, which is 36 inches instead. With regards to other issues that we've been highlighted within the petition, there's been talk about there's a high number of sort of turnover within the tenants. We'd just like to make clear that we've had the property for 5 years. The first set of tenants stayed for a year, the second set have stayed for 2, and these set that are in there are also there for 2 years. This is in accordance to kind of what we have as an AST, and basically we have a property which is in very good condition and we charge high rent. It's not because the rent is low that people are staying, so we keep it in a very good condition. With regards to noise and extra people within the property, both sets of neighbours have my and my wife's phone number, as do the property owners opposite us, and we've never to date had any complaints from any of those 3 adjoining properties to suggest that there is any inclination of noise, etc. There was a complaint made to Brunel University 2.5 months ago regarding that the property was not HMO licensed. We have resolved that, and within that we've got an email back from Brunel stating that the complaint was only about the HMO and not in regards to any noise, pollution or anything like that with regards to the students. We have had, which is probably slightly aside, threatening messages from our neighbour over the phone. We have talked to the police about that, who will take suggestive action if another threat is made against us due to this planning permission. He's basically said, I'm not going to let this go through, etc., etc., we're criminals. So I think from our perspective, we've done everything by the books. We've had a HMO licence. It's not, from a complaints perspective, we've had no issues. You've seen the parking as well, and it's there for six cars. So yeah, that's kind of primarily what we have to say to you. Want to add anything to that?
Covered it all.
Okay, thank you very much. You've no obligation to speak for 5 minutes. It's up to 5 minutes. Colleagues, are there any questions you wish to ask the petitioner for clarification? Thank you very much. I invite you to return to your seat. Councillor Mills, who is one of the ward councillors, the ward councillors are entitled to speak for 3 minutes when there's a petition. Councillor Mills is unable to be at the meeting this evening, but he has asked me to read in some comments into the record, which I will now do. Councillor Mills says, I object to the planning application before you this evening relating to 7 Abbots Close, Cowley, as this would become an overdevelopment of a property that is already large in scale for its position within a small cul-de-sac. The application is for a rear storey extension, which will effectively increase the number of bedrooms in the property from 4 to 6, without increasing or providing any additional living space or toilets. The application refers to each bedroom as a letting room, and in total this application would now provide 6 letting rooms with only 1 small bathroom and small shared living space. Whilst I appreciate that the proposed extension will not be overbearing on neighbours' properties, the negative impact on the neighbouring residents will come from the increased number of movements in and out of the property compared to what is currently experienced. We can tell from the application that this HMO lets each room to individual people or couples, therefore they will not be coming and going as a group but as 6 sets of people. In a cul-de-sac this would cause considerable inconvenience, and I'd like to remind the committee of a previous planning application in Morello Avenue that came before them that was refused due to the increased number of journeys in and out of the house. The same principle should be applied here. I disagree with the report that the number of comings and goings would not necessarily be more than if it was a single family dwelling house. Whilst the report notes that there is a stretched gravel drive with off-street parking for 6 cars, I hope images will be available to show to you that not all 6 cars can come and go independently from one another. For one person to move out, they will require other cars to move for them, effectively creating more vehicle movements and more impact on neighbouring residents, again all in a small cul-de-sac of 14 homes. I hope the committee will take note of the main points of increasing only bedrooms and not shared and toilet facilities in their property, along with the impact this will have on the road, all the additional movements, plus the lack of practical and independently usable parking space. I suggest that the committee takes these points on board, along with those made by the petitioners present, and refuse the application. Councillor Mills. Okay. Colleagues, I open this for questions. Councillor Yarrow, you indicated earlier.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's been answered. I may have misheard the officer when she said there were 3 parking spaces, but I've heard the figure of 6 mentioned twice now. Can we just confirm that it is 6?
I'll let the highways on.
Yes, Chairman, the council's parking standards only require 3 parking spaces for a development of this size, and 3 parking spaces can be provided independently accessed.
Okay, that satisfy you? Councillor Chandel?
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions. First one is, we're definitely talking about 5 or 6 rooms, because on the plans, or am I reading incorrectly, on page 95, where it says letting rooms.
Sorry.
No, you go.
Apologies, there are 4 single letting rooms and 1 double letting room. So the ground floor, as proposed, would provide a open kitchen, dining area and a lounge with 2 letting rooms to the rear, and the first floor would provide 1 double room and 2 single rooms. So that's 5 letting rooms with an occupancy level of 6 persons.
So those 2 on the first floor are the single ones, are they?
They are.
Opposite the bathroom.
That's right. Due to the realignment of the wall, the double room from the existing layout changes to a single room based on the housing standards.
Right. The other question was, we're not considering this as a HMO then. Could I just have some clarification just once again on that?
Yeah, if I can give a perhaps separate but more simplified explanation of this. So this particular property, without planning permission, can have up to 6 persons independently living there as a house of multiple occupation. Through the planning condition, we are conditioning this property for up to 6 persons there independently living, albeit in reality there's only 5 bedrooms, so there'd be a couple there. So what I'm basically trying to say in plain English is that they could adapt without planning permission the existing property to have the same number of people as the extension would provide, and the extension complies with all our policies and guidance. So there's a certain point of view that all this proposal is doing is providing a slightly better living standard for up to 6 persons in an HMO. I think if they went beyond the 6 persons, at that point we might start to look more closely at parking and whether other planning conditions or issues might come into play. But as it is, I think it's actually a quite straightforward proposal. But there was a point mentioned earlier, I wouldn't mind just quickly coming back to the issue of the location plan. Rather than striking off the location plan, if members wish to agree the officer recommendation, they might wish to delegate to the head of planning to just get that corrected, because that would be a slightly, I'm not sure cleaner is the right word, but it would be a slightly better way than actually removing the location plan, because that would normally be one of the basic plans we would insist an applicant provides. So I'm a little uncomfortable, to be honest, actually removing the location plan from the approved plans. I'd rather, if committee are happy, you delegate to me to just get that dimension corrected so it matches the applicant's intentions, which I think are clearly for a 3.6 metre deep extension.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery.
On the basis that this complies with council policy, we may all have our views whether it's an appropriate development in given where it is in a small close, but it does comply with policy. It predates the Article 4 direction, and that the principal grounds that neighbours were objecting was in fact that it was an unregistered HMO, which we now have evidence is not the case. I don't think there's anything more we can do with it other than approve officer recommendations, which I'd be happy to propose.
Thank you very much. Before we take that formally, Councillor Money and Councillor Morse, or vice versa, however you wish.
Okay. I think Councillor Lavery took the words from my mouth. I was going to propose, so I'll
You will second.
seconder, yeah. Sorry.
Did you want to ask one question? When I look at the first floor, I see the room that's marked as double seems to be almost the same size as a single. Is this because this report is inaccurate in saying there's one? This is just something I just want to understand. Or you may have explained it, you conditioned it with 5, but the room seems similar in size.
The room is not similar in size. So you can see from the plan behind you there is a red dotted line, and that wall indicates a new wall which will provide a partition to provide 2 single rooms on the right hand side and 1 double room on the left. So the size changes of that larger room to a single room based on the adopted floor space standards that we have for single occupancy and then double occupancy.
Thank you. I think we must take the room sizes and the application of the standards, and we're saying the one on the left meets the standard for a double, and the one on the right meets the standard for a single. And what we are doing is approving plans here for the 4 single and 1 double room, as shown here. Now I've had it moved and seconded. It's another matter of Councillor Chandal, then, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to comment what Councillor Mills made. Do you need any comment from the officers regards the movement? How we grade a house if it's just as a one-family house of 6 people and 6 individuals in terms of movement. Councillor Mills made a comment in regards to that, and I would like some clarification on that.
Is this in terms of vehicle movements or people movements?
People movement.
Okay. I need to have you guys come in now on this one.
Under permitted development rights, this number of persons can occupy this premises, so it is comparable to what would be a single dwelling house with this many rooms. And so it's the comings and goings. Yes, it's an antisocial behaviour issue, and that's governed by the HMO licensing. But in terms of material planning considerations, what we're actually looking at is a single-storey rear extension, as opposed to the comings and goings and its lawful use of a HMO. And we've also imposed a condition in the addendum which restricts the number of persons to 6, which is the maximum they can have under their permitted development rights, which also restricts comings and goings, both vehicular and persons.
Yeah, I get that. The point I was making, as Councillor Mills was making, was you would consider 6 individuals living in rooms have a greater level of movement rather than sort of family of 6.
If I can come in here, I think the issue here is what additional harm's being caused.
Yeah.
Well, under permitted development, they can occupy with 6 people now. And all we're doing is making a slightly bigger footprint for those 6 people to live in. So there's no additional harm being caused. If they put 7 people in, they breach the planning condition, if that were what members decided to vote upon. So I understand the point you're making, but I think it's outside of this because they already have the permitted developments to occupy this as an HMO for 6 people. And we're not talking about extending it beyond that. So there is no additional harm, and therefore there is no impact on the wider community here of intensification of use. Okay, now I've had it moved and seconded, but I would like to clarify that that's moving and seconding, taking note of the comments within the addendum, which is the additional condition, as well as delegating to the head of planning the clarification of the site plan to show 3.6 rather than 4 metres. Is that proposed and seconded? Thank you. Show of hands, please, on that one. And abstentions? And 1 abstention. Thank you very much. That planning permit was approved. Okay, thank you very much. Go to agenda item 7, please. Land forming part of 84 Church Road, Hayes.
Thank you, Chair. Members should be advised that there is an addendum for this application which just provides some clarification with regard to comments from our trees officer. I'd take you through the proposed plan. This application is for the development of 1 2-bedroom dwelling, which would be a detached property with associated parking and amenity space. The application site is the back of number 84 Church Road, but the access to the property would be via Churchfield, which you can see. I don't know if we have any clearer plans. Probably not. Churchfield Close, which is on the other side. So the application would be a 2-storey detached property, as you can see from the plans, with private amenity space. The application itself is considered to be acceptable in terms of its impact on the character and appearance of the area. The design is of a very similar appearance to those of the adjoining properties on Churchfield Close, which will be its principal elevation. However, the property does have internal floor areas that do not meet the national standard requirements for this size of property, and the private amenity space is also substandard for a 2-bedroom property. As such, the application is recommended for refusal based on those reasons. There is the loss of a tree on the front elevation. Now, some comments have been received from the arboricultural officer with regard to the quality of this tree. The tree was considered for a tree preservation order last year. It was not considered to be of merit, and the comments are provided within the addendum report, and therefore it's not considered to be sustainable to refuse the application on the loss of this tree, because there is the ability to recompense the loss of the amenity value. The application is recommended for refusal.
Thank you. Again, a valid petition has been received on this one. Is the petitioner present? Wish to speak? No. I have information that the applicant, Mujadid, forgive me my pronunciation. Good evening. If you'd like to come forward, you will have, again, 5 minutes speaking right, and I'll remind you what we have. It's 4 minutes speaking time with the green light, 1 with the amber. When the red light comes on, I must bring you to a close. The toggle on and off with the microphone, and at your own convenience, once you toggle on the microphone, we will start your timing. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have lived in Hillingdon Borough for over 15 years with my husband, and we bought a second property in 2015, 84 Church Road, Hayes. We're seeking to build a property in the rear of the garden of 84 Church Road, similar to the existing properties in Churchfield Close. We've been told that all the properties built in that area of Churchfield Close were built by Hillingdon Council, using land from the gardens of houses in Church Road, apart from the garden of 84 Church Road, as the owners refused to sell part of their garden to the council at the time. By building the proposed house, the gap left in Churchfield Close, where a property would have been built by the council, will be filled in. In order to build the property, we've approached Hillingdon Council's estate office to buy the area of land in Churchfield Close to provide access to the new property. This purchase from the council is subject to receiving planning permission and has yet to be completed. Councillors have already approved this purchase at a meeting earlier in the year. The original plan submitted with our application shows a 600mm gap to the boundary on either side of the property, which gives an internal floor area of 76 square metres. Our architect has recently submitted a revised plan on the recommendation of the planning officer, leaving a 1-metre gap to the boundary on either side of the property. This has resulted in a smaller house with an internal floor area of 64.8 square metres, and as a result the application is recommended for refusal. Therefore, we would kindly request that the councillors consider granting permission based on the original plan submitted, which has an internal floor area of 76 square metres and is an adequate size for a 2-bedroom, 3-person house. Although the gaps to the sides would be 600mm to both boundaries, the overall gap on either side of the new property to the existing properties would be 1,600mm to one side and 1,210mm to the other side. We understand the reasoning for a 1-metre gap is to prevent dwellings forming a terraced appearance. However, the existing properties in Churchfield Close are built as long blocks of mid-terraces with no gaps between the blocks, and therefore our property would not be out of character in the area. If you have it, please see page 2 of the design and access statement submitted, and I've got further photos of Churchfield Close if you need them. In this instance, would the councillors please consider granting the application based on the gap of 600mm to both boundaries shown on the initial plan? We understand some residents of Churchfield Close have voiced concerns about parking issues due to experiencing existing problems. If planning permission is granted, we would do everything possible to minimise parking problems during construction. Contractors would use the 2 spaces in the front garden of the new property, and there is also room for up to 4 vehicles in the drive of 84 Church Road if needed. Once the works are completed, the property would have its own 2 parking spaces, so the occupants of the property would not cause additional pressure on parking locally, and we note that the Highways Officer states he does not have significant highway concerns over the application. Finally, the area with the tree in Churchfield Close has not been well maintained, and the tree is covered in ivy, leaning to one side, and has become very overgrown and unsightly. Furthermore, there's an issue with security, as we've been told by our neighbour in 82 Church Road that she has previously been burgled via the rear garden of 84 Church Road, using the dark area near the tree to get from Churchfield Close. This is a security issue for 82, 84 and 86 Church Road, and for the 2 properties in Churchfield Close. Building a property in this area would overcome the problem by preventing access. By building the new property, extra valuable housing will be provided in the borough, as there is a shortage of housing, and additional funds will be raised for Hillingdon Council, both from the premium we pay for purchasing the land in Churchfield Close and from the CIL payment to the council. We would respectfully ask the councillors to grant the application. Thank you very much for listening, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Colleagues, are there any questions to the petitioner? No, thank you very much. If I invite you to please return to the seats. Thank you. Sorry, do you have a question? Petitioner, my apologies. My apologies to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned the distance between your neighbours, proposed neighbours. One was 1610. What was the other one you said?
Right. Yeah.
1210.
Yeah.
Well, you said it because on the plan it only shows 1 metre.
That's the current plan. We put in an original plan with the application, which had 600mm on our side, and there's an additional gap between the our property, our land, and the neighbouring property, they have a gap down the side of their property as well. And if you add the 600 to the neighbour's one, it makes the 1,210.
Okay. I need to just draw that. What we have to do is consider the plans before us.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't have scope to
No.
replace these plans with previously submitted ones.
Yes,
Okay.
right.
What we will do as a committee is consider what is before us this evening.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions of the petitioner? Thank you. If I could invite you, please, to return to the seat. Okay. As I was saying, as a planning committee, we don't have the right to redraw plans. What we do is consider the plans before us. Okay, and the plans before us are those that are submitted that show the sizes of the rooms and the gaps and everything else, and that we will consider before us tonight. So, colleagues, open this up for discussion and consideration, please. Any views at all? Councillor Lavery.
Well, I'll start it off in case anybody else did. Based on the plans before us, which is clearly what we have got to consider, we have a proposal that gives a building that is not correctly sized in terms of London Plan guidance and is below standard. And also the secondary reason, which is that the amenity space provided is very significantly below what one would expect for a two-bedroom house. It's not marginal, it's significant. So even if you consider it a slightly larger property, the amenity space doesn't change. So from what I have heard and what I've got, I think the officer report is sound and there's no reason to disagree with it.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Any other views? Councillor Koshy?
Second that.
I propose that. I'm happy to propose.
You're seconding it. Colleagues, on this one then, a show of hands, please. Let's go with the officer's recommendation as there. That is, the application is refused. I do believe there will be a way forward, though. Okay? I cannot believe, with such pressure on housing in London, that an answer can't be found. Okay? But I would encourage you to work with our planners to find an answer if one is available. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 8, number 8, Poultry Road.
Thank you, Chair. Agenda item 8 is a slightly unusual case as it's an appeal against non-determination. The application is for the expansion and deepening of the existing basement, a lower level patio, a single-storey rear extension, which would essentially replace an existing outrigger, a new skylight within the roof, as well as realignment of the internal floor levels. I will take you through the plans, but there is an addendum which is on page 3, and I just wanted to point out that it's actually the planning inspectorate who will be the decision maker on this case. As a committee, we are ratifying the officer recommendation to refuse the scheme, and that will form part of our appeal statement. So if we look at the application site as existing, the proposals already have an existing basement floor level, which is shown on the far left, the ground floor level, the first floor, and then the roof plans. By comparison, the proposal would seek a basement extension, which extends along the extent of the property. At first floor level, the outrigger would be replaced by a modern extension, and at first floor level, there are technically no alterations. There is the removal of a window and then the insertion of a skylight in the roof. There are a few anomalies with the plans that we need to point out. The rear elevation, so this is the top row and the third image, shows that there is a window up on the, sorry, it's the floor plan. We needed to go, apologies. The floor plan shows that on the first floor level, the back bedroom is served by a window which faces out into the rear garden. So that's the third floor plan along. However, when we go to the elevational drawings, we can see that under the proposed rear elevation, which is the last image, there is no rear elevation window. The back bedroom would be served solely by a skylight that's proposed as part of this application. And if we take you through some photographs, this is the front elevation of the property, which essentially doesn't change significantly as part of the proposals. And this were some historic images of the rear. So there is a makeshift outrigger shelter, which would be demolished in order to accommodate the extensions. This is a slightly poor image of the neighbour's rear elevation, but the original property would both have had the outrigger that you can see on the neighbour's extension, or the neighbour's property. The application is recommended for refusal. As part of the addendum, we've tried to update you that there is a certificate of lawful development which has been approved on this application, and so the application, the drawing, a certificate approved on the site. I'm not quite sure what I said, but it was clearly wrong. So there is a certificate of lawful development approved on this site, and that does include the basement and the first floor extension, as well as a dormer roof extension. There has been a dismissed appeal on this application site. Whilst the council refused the principle of a basement in the past, the inspector were of a different view and considered that the basement extension was not inappropriate development, and as such, the basement was not part of the reasons for refusal, and that's the reason why we are proposing to we would otherwise have imposed conditions to secure suitable details of drainage with regard to the basement. The application is, however, recommended for refusal, principally because of two reasons. So the rear elevation, as a result of the changes to the fenestration and the misalignment, creates a poor, fails to harmonise with the proportions of the existing building. The second reason for refusal, I'd like to just take you through the plans. This relates to all of the various levels within the existing property. On this plan, you can see on the existing floor plan that there are steps from the main section of the house. Firstly, steps down into the outrigger, and then steps down again into what would possibly have been a coal shed. Under the proposed development, those would be realigned, and the best way to show the changes is the section drawings. So the section at the top shows how there are changing levels in the property at the moment, and in order to regularise that, those levels would change, bringing the floor level of the first floor up, but that has a detrimental impact insofar as there is insufficient head height and therefore room space in the back bedroom, and as a result of not having a window and only being served by a roof light, it provides poor outlook. This is the second reason for refusal on this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Johnson, petitioner, you present? You wish to speak? Please, if you'd like to come forward, sir. Remind you, you have 5 minutes of speaking time. 5 minutes of speaking time, 4 minutes with a green light showing, 1 with an amber. When it comes to red, I will bring you to a close. The microphone's a toggle on off button. You will see the light on when it comes on. At your own convenience, which you toggle on, your timing will start. Okay, sir? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Nick Johnson, and I live at 10 Bawtry Road in the historic four-house terrace called Halsey Villas. These houses were built in 1835, so they're amongst the oldest buildings in North Uxbridge. I do want our neighbouring property, 8 Bawtry Road, to be modernised and occupied, but along with the other petitioners, I object strongly to the proposal by the new owners to dramatically deepen and extend the current small-sized, low-headroom central cellar. My big concern is that our new neighbours' ambitious plans to dig some 1.3 metres below the existing, somewhat basic 1830s foundations of these old villas will threaten the structural stability of not only their own house, but also my adjoining property. Basement excavations have caused too many high-profile building collapses in the past, and such work increases the risk of flooding whilst creating dust, noise and disruption for surrounding residents during the often lengthy construction process. I commend the officers of Hillingdon Council Planning Department for compiling a very professional report in response to this planning application. They have provided some very good reasons for refusal, which I trust will be endorsed by this committee. Regarding the groundwater issue, I agree that there is a need to conduct a proper, independent, site-specific investigation to accurately determine the effect of heavy rain. This must be carried out to embrace a period of typical rainfall. The applicants too shallow self-assessment pit test was carried out during one of the driest springs on record, so the reported dryness and lack of groundwater is clearly not representative of the more usual weather conditions and must therefore be discounted. The proposed basement extension will obviously create a dam to trap water and make my cellar even damper and potentially undermine the flimsy 1830s foundations of my house. I continuously run a dehumidifier in my cellar, and after rain I have to empty this 4-litre capacity water tank at least once every 24 hours. The deeper new basement will, if approved, only create more water build-up. A good indication of how the water table rises down the slope of Borough Road was graphically provided in September last year when National Grid carried out extensive excavation works in the street to sleeve the old gas main. Holes were dug outside each house to provide new connections to the revamped gas main, and after heavy rain, it was very noticeable how the standing water levels in these connection holes rose up as one walked down the hill. The standing water in the hole outside our property rose up higher than the proposed depth of the new party wall between us and 8 Borough Road. Regarding the proposed subterranean floor being habitable, I still question the conclusion that providing a section of glazed flooring internally under the existing bay window will provide sufficient natural light to the front of the extended basement. This is a north-facing elevation, and even on a sunny day, bright light is only apparent for around an hour and a half early in the morning before the sun moves around the building. We know that, without direct sunshine, the amount of natural light at floor level under the front bay window is very limited, certainly not sufficient to properly illuminate all the front of the proposed enormous underground room, especially if glazed floor panels are frosted to preserve the modesty of people standing above. And what is to stop these glazed panels from being covered over by carpets or furniture? This is hardly a viable solution. I also question the ventilation and fire safety aspects of this extended basement. These are important considerations, especially if the new space is ever used as a granny flat. I appreciate that many of the issues of most concern to me, the structural risks to my property from both the basement enlargement works and subsequent party wall differential cracking, are not matters that strictly form part of the current planning process. This omission and my worries about the ability of the current building regulations regime to adequately control the safe completion of such a complex conversion in so old a property needs to be addressed nationally. A recent high-profile fire tragedy has graphically shown the consequences of officialdom ignoring the very valid safety concerns of the residents involved in conversion works. Hopefully this committee will follow the recommendation of its planning officers and unanimously refuse this application, which I could contend could put my property and indeed my life at risk. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, sir. Any questions at all of the petitioner? No, thank you very much. I invite you to return to your seat. Thank you. The applicant, Mr. Lee, present and wish to speak. So, I'll remind you, 5 minutes speaking time, 4 minutes with the green light, 1 with the amber. When it comes to the red, I must draw you to a close. The microphone, the button in front of the microphone itself, it toggles it on and off. Thank you.
Thanks for letting me speak this time. It's, I think we can actually come to some sort of agreement on this, that actually we've already submitted an application before this, which was, as quite rightly said, it was dismissed. This application obviously addressed all of the issues that were brought to light in the first application, that the planning inspectorate, would have actually approved with conditions. My point to this is we already have a permitted development certificate that addresses, a whole host of issues, and they already allow the basement development here. Not to the extent that we show on here, but the basement is a non-issue in the actual application report that James Rogers provided. What we would say is it actually is in the benefit of the local sort of residents and also Hillingdon Planning Authority and Borough to actually allow this application. I actually feel it addresses some of the sort of homes for life conditions that are placed on properties or new properties now. by allowing a single floor where disabled access is available. You can see from the original plan that there's multiple levels in the house. The whole point of the original design on this was to allow a single sort of passage, so that if we have elderly relatives over, they can actually come and stay, and they'd have the full use of that floor, including bathrooms, etc. Obviously, with the actual permitted development, that actually doesn't address that problem. It has steps in it, but actually it allows us to extend out further out to the back, as you can see here. And in the first place, we didn't want to disrupt neighbours. We didn't want to disrupt anything really. We just wanted to provide a nice, a pleasant house that we can actually live in with our little daughter. What I will say to the points of other issues is we actually already do have a mechanical ventilation heat recovery unit that we've got ready for the site, which will obviously address some of the ventilation issues. With regards to the current application, that the rear bedroom, I would suggest that obviously that wasn't highlighted to us. We could have easily made a tweak on that and adjusted the floor levels. If you look at the actual section in ground floor rear, it's actually it was going to be used as a sort of a sitting room cum bedroom if an elderly relative needed to come over and stay. What we will say is obviously that looks out onto the back, and there was something raised in one of the points about overlooking neighbours, and that actually isn't the case due to the actual lie of the land. There's also in the rear section on the ground floor level, that floor to ceiling height is 2.8 metres. So to counteract the actual issues with the plan, I would suggest that if there's no reason to approve this with a condition that we drop the floor level 300 millimetres, which then allows a 2.4 ceiling height in the first floor bedroom, and that condition then addresses as part of the issues with this plan. The fact that the actual skylight does not have a window in the wall, that is another condition. The idea was to actually have a vertical unit, a Velux with a vertical section within that, so it forms an L shape on the roof, and that's again another condition that we could actually quite easily place on this. If we do put those two conditions on this, I would recommend this for approval, to just avoid another round of this, because if those are the only two issues with the actual build, the actual, who was it that said this? It was actually the flood water management officer. He doesn't have any issues with it, as long as we have the correct conditions approved. And also, this is an issue that the structural side of things and engineering side of things, if there are any, are managed by building control and a party wall agreement, which James Rogers already highlighted that we already did in the first instance, and we would do again in this instance with an updated structural plan.
I have the impression our light system is not working well because we're down to seconds.
Sorry. Okay.
No, it's okay. I won't cut you off because we've not given you adequate warning that I need to bring you to a close.
That's
so
fine.
could I bring you to a close, please?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what I will say is obviously we bought the property. It has no central heating system in. Quite rightly, Nick has pointed out that it's a Victorian property, but at the same time, if everyone thought the Victorians did things properly, we'd still be going to the toilet in the shed in the garden. So.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Colleagues, are there any questions at all, clarification? Councillor Morse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I notice in this plan you keep a 1.4 metre wide section of a raised floor with the adjacent wall. Now, I can understand the gentleman's concern about this. What did your structural engineer recommend on this? Because it seems a complex project, and I would have grave concerns about the safety of my house if I was in the gentleman we just spoke.
Sure. So our structural engineer, he's done multiple basement extensions in Kensington and Chelsea. He's also worked on bunkers for politicians. he understands that the load of a wall needs to be addressed, and that's why with actually, if you look at I don't know if you have the cut through of the foundation there.
I think I really need to just try and close this one off.
Sure.
The issue before us is the structural issues around the party wall are covered by other legislation, the Party Wall Act, and is outside of our planning committee's consideration. And that may come as a real surprise to many residents, but the things that we as a committee are able to consider are actually quite defined, material planning considerations. Where other legislation controls it, we're not able to take that into consideration. For example, the noise and dust during construction work, a reasonable and valid reason for objecting, but it's not something we as a committee can take into account because that can be controlled elsewhere. Similarly, with regards to the structural matters around party wall, that is subject to the Party Wall Act and is therefore controlled elsewhere. So, any other questions at all? Thank you, sir. If I could invite you to return to your seat. Yeah, right. I do wish to pick up from the petitioners. We've heard about structural stability, building noise and dust, drainage in the underwater table and hydraulic issues, which I'll speak to, and also comment on suggestions that we again change the plans before us, drop floor heights, change room uses. Mr. Roger.
Yes. The first important point to bear in mind with this case is there's already been a planning application go to appeal, and so the inspector dealt with basically the same basement but a different extension. And that same basement, the inspector, officers at that point in time raised issues regarding whether there was sufficient information to deal with drainage concerns. And the inspector said categorically that the drainage issues being raised could be dealt with by a planning condition had the inspector considered the appeal acceptable in all other respects. But the inspector had concerns regarding the rear extension proposed. So, and then to add to what you said, Chairman, there is other legislation that deals specifically with the structural concerns that the neighbour had, namely the Party Wall Act and the building control legislation. I can actually advise committee that the party wall process has already commenced in this case. The reason I'm mentioning that is that in itself actually gives me some comfort that process, which doesn't actually involve the local authority, means there's surveyors involved, and I happen to know that both parties actually are getting professional advice from surveyors in this case. I know that the applicant has drawn your attention that he's getting professional advice from a surveyor, but it's my understanding that the objector is as well, because the Party Wall Act has been triggered in this case. But that said, an inspector has given a clear steer that effectively the basement issue is the only issue the local authority should be concerning itself is the flood risk issues, and the inspectors told us that can be dealt with by planning condition. So effectively, I would say all you're dealing with is the rear extension. And then the point that was raised by the applicant is, can the plans be altered to try and avoid a refusal recommendation? If it was a minor typographical error, which is I think how I would treat an issue raised with the location plan on the first issue before committee, that's one thing, but then effectively redrawing the plans, that really needs to be subject to a different committee report and treated as a different matter, and we've got a non-determination appeal here, so my advice would be to determine the plans before you in this case.
Thank you very much. So there we have it, colleagues. The basement planning inspector has looked at and said can be conditioned to enable it to be built. What we have is the consideration of the plans before us, which include the outcome as noted in the officer's report concerning the fenestration and the unusual alignment at the rear of the property, not fitting in with the neighbourhood, and also the interior floor area of one of the bedrooms.
One more point. So one more point of clarification. The applicant mentioned about a certificate of lawfulness. All the certificate of lawfulness does is confirm that certain works fall within permitted development tolerances. So in this case, the single-storey rear extension that benefits from permitted development has a ridge height under 4 metres and an eaves height under 3 metres. So in plain English, it's a single-storey only rear extension that can be done under permitted development, whereas the plans before you are, I think, to be honest, a 1.5-storey extension. They're not. I don't think you could really describe them as a single-storey extension, albeit I know that's what the applicant put in their description of development and how we've described the proposals.
Thank you. Councillor Morse.
I do have one question. It says the council will not support basement developments that extend the full width or length of the site. If we don't seem to have any planning issues, how can we make that statement? I'm just interested. That particular quotation relates to a policy in our emerging Part 2 local plan, and that particular policy is not being used for development control purposes by this council yet. So I know where that line comes from, but it's not one of our current planning policies. It hasn't gone through. The Part 2 local plan isn't advanced enough, so we're not using that particular policy. So there is a basement policy in the Part 2 local plan, but as members know, the Part 2 local plan isn't being used by the council yet for planning decisions, only the Part 1 plan.
Okay, so it's interesting, until such time as we properly adopt those Part 2 plans, we can be aware of what is being said, but they can't carry too much weight. And also, it has to be said that in this case, the basement doesn't extend either the full length or the full width of the site. So it isn't outside of that policy anyway. Okay, so can I please focus this in on the issues before us, which is the report and the plans as drawn and not as may be suggested could be changed. Councillor Lavery.
I'll stick to the plans as drawn. I have, before I do, let me just say I have great sympathy with residents on basements. It has come up elsewhere, and I understand the grave concerns that people do have. But as the head of planning and the chairman has already indicated, our hands are very tied, particularly where a planning inspectorate has also ruled. Turning to what is before us, we again have, it must be a theme of this evening, people are going to attempt to redraw schemes before us. We have to consider what is before us and the officer recommendations. We clearly have a bedroom that doesn't have sufficient height, which again is, doesn't provide appropriate standards for future occupiers. And if you look at the rear of that building, it isn't appropriately proportioned. So I would see, from where I am, no reason to disagree with the officer report. I was going to say, there's nothing in the addendum that changes it, it just clarifies it. And I'd be happy to propose the officer recommendations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lavery. Councillor Morse.
I will certainly second. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Show of hands, please, in support of that one. Thank you. That application is refused. Thank you. Agenda item 9, please. Bannerman Centre.
Thank you, Chair. The Bannerman Centre is get to the item, is located within Brunel University and its wider campus site. The proposals themselves are, in effect, fairly straightforward. What we have on site is an existing cafe. The floor plan on the left is the existing layout. The proposals seek to provide a larger cafe to serve the premises and the wider Brunel site. Whilst it's essentially a change of use and some external works, the cafe itself is not changing the use of the entire site or the building. It would still be ancillary to the main use of the property and the premises as an educational establishment, so it's an ancillary use. There are, in effect, marginal external works. The elevation drawings on the top right of this drawing show some additional doors inserted. There are some minor fenestration changes, but the majority of the works relate to the internal alterations and have no wider impact on the built form and the site's location within the Greenbelt. The proposals are recommended for approval, subject to the addendum. I would just highlight that I would like to verbally propose an additional informative which relates to food hygiene, which has been missed from the officer report and addendum. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Councillor Bolana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's explained in the addendum sheet. Obviously, there is no, I think, further discussion on this needed, so I'm happy to propose with the officer recommendations.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder on that one, please? Councillor Chapman, thank you very much. So this is moving subject to the additional informative with regards to advertising, additional informative with regards to food hygiene. Is that carried, please? Show of hands? That is everybody. Thank you very much. So, madam, just which item are you before? Because we might be able to change the order so you don't have to stay too long.
Item 11 and 12, 5, 4.
Can we quickly flick through? Let's take items 11 and 12 then, just for your convenience, okay? So we'll go to agenda item 11, number 5, Field Close, Hillingdon.
Item 11 on the committee agenda is number 5, Field Close. Item 12 is also Field Close, so I'll do a single presentation of the site and then we'll look at the two proposals before us. I'm not having a good day with the application site's on the northwest of Field Close. The property is a single-family dwelling house. The first application seeks to propose a first-floor rear extension on the property, so it's most visible from the floor plans. It would project out 3 metres and would be offset from the neighbouring boundary. As a result, the impact is not considered the development is not considered to have an amenity or a design impact on the street scene or the neighbouring residents, and is therefore recommended for approval. I'll take you through photos of the application site. This is the front elevation, the garage that you can see on the plans, the rear of the property, so the extension would be above the glazed door that you can see on the left-hand side, and the existing outbuilding. That relates to the second proposal, which is agenda item 12. I'll talk you through both items and then you can vote separately. Agenda item 12 is a slightly different application. It seeks to amend the internal layout of the outbuilding at the application site. I'll take you through some of the history. So a planning appeal was allowed at this site in April 2012 for the conversion of this outbuilding and annex to be used as an annex to the main dwelling house. At the time of making the decision, the inspector was clear in advising that due to the lack of provision of a kitchen, the appeal should be allowed as the outbuilding will always be ancillary to the main house. Therefore, it could never be self-contained. The current application seeks to install a second bathroom, as you can see on the floor plans, into the outbuilding. There is no proposal to include the installation of a kitchen. Whilst the council don't consider 2 bathrooms in an outbuilding to be necessary by virtue of an outbuilding requirements, we are to a certain extent bound by the appeal decision insofar as without the installation of a kitchen and the ability to self-contain this unit, subject to the imposition of the same restrictive conditions, that it's only ever used as ancillary to the main dwelling house, the application is recommended for approval. And I will pass you back to the Chair.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, these are 2 applications, as you say, for the same site. The first one, if we can take agenda item 11, the first floor extension with no negative impact on amenity of neighbours and is within our policy. Colleagues, somebody help me here. Councillor Yarrow. Thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor Lavery. Show of hands, please. That's unanimous. And 12, this is one we may have some discomfort with, an outbuilding where planning inspector has given us some very clear steering guidance on this, the internal alterations. Somebody help me here, please.
I'll start you off. I've got to say, I think our hands are fairly tied by the planning inspectorate, but not one that I find comfortable in the slightest.
Agreed.
It may not have a kitchen, but it's got absolutely anything else you'd want. It's a very unusual outbuilding, and it's not an application I'm comfortable with. But I think I'd like to hear colleagues' views, but I think our hands are probably tied by the inspectorate.
Let's see to the extent
our hands, I think committee's hands are tied, which is why I think there's actually a very important informative in the addendum that we put on the decision notice that this decision's made because of the appeal decision. Now, the importance of that, and the reason I hope it gives the committee some comfort, is it enables me, when there's another application in the same street or in a different location, to then say this application doesn't set a precedent because we're only making the decision because of an earlier appeal decision. So hopefully with that informative, it gives the committee the comfort to approve the application, which I think you don't have much option to do.
Councillor Chandal.
Yeah, I have to agree with Councillor Levy. The plan for the outbuilding is strange, but I think what James has just said, I think that is comforting. I think go with the officer's recommendation for that.
So you're moving it. Somebody second it, please. Councillor Money, thank you very much. Show of hands, please, on that one. That's also agreed. Thank you. Okay, we go back now. I'm sorry about this. One back to number 10.
Agenda item 10 is number 2 St Margaret's Avenue. The application site is shown on the location plan in red. The proposals seek the development of two-storey, 3-bed semi-detached dwellings, and those are located fronting onto St Margaret's Avenue. An additional 2-storey, 3-bedroom detached dwelling would also be provided to the rear of the site, fronting onto Micawber Avenue. The application is recommended for refusal due to its cramped form of development and the impact on adjoining neighbours. Sorry, if I take you through the plans, whilst the application proposals have been kept fairly low in height, so this is the existing premises on the site, and then the proposed developments are also sort of 1.5 stories in height, so all of the additional accommodation at first floor level is contained primarily within the roof slope. It's still considered to be a cramped form of development. I am sorry about this pointer.
Don't apologise. It's not you. Please, we'll resolve it for the next time.
One of the things, so the other schemes on this site have been refused in the past. Now, I want to take you through the planning history before we look at making a decision on this case. So I'll take you through some of the photos of the site. This is the front elevation, so it's quite well screened from the street with a relatively high hedge. This is the garage, and this is a view from St Margaret's Avenue. This is, so the property to the right is number 4 St Margaret's Avenue, and that's the application site in the rear elevation. Okay, this is the property at Micawber Avenue. Again, it's a very small single-storey or chalet-style property. If I can try and take you back, so that's the relationship between the existing property in number 4, and on the rear boundary, this is the relationship with the existing property which fronts onto Micawber Avenue. I take you through the planning history as long as this will let me take you there. There you go. So an appeal was allowed at the application site, and that was for the retention of the existing dwelling which fronts onto St Margaret's Avenue, and the proposal of one single family dwelling house, and that would have been a single-storey level as well, and that is shown on the floor plans. This was the application was refused by the council. However, it was allowed on appeal because it was not considered to have a detrimental impact and was not considered to be overdevelopment. It was also deemed that it was appropriate development of a garden area. An application was then refused in 2017, and this proposed one property fronting onto St Margaret's Avenue, so it was 3 detached properties altogether, and 2 detached properties facing onto Micawber Avenue. Again, this application was refused because of its cramped nature, overdevelopment, and just its excessive impact on the street scene and also neighbouring amenity. The current proposal has not really sought to address the issues that were raised under the previous refusal, and for that reason the application is recommended for refusal. The plan up here does show the extant consent, so the property that they have permission for, juxtaposed against the refuse scheme to the bottom left and the current proposal. And I'm happy to answer any queries on this case. The application is recommended for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery.
I don't think there are any queries. I think it's just too much on a small site. It's the usual story, trying to cram at least one more property in than the site can take. It clearly can take something, but I would be more than happy to support the officer recommendation on this one. I don't think there's any reason we would want to change it.
I've been remiss. I believe I should read into record. Councillor Mills wished to make a representation on this, and I will very quickly add that in. In fact, there being no members of the public present, we have a printed record that can be appended to the minutes and dealt with that way, not hold up any further time. Councillor Chandal.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure, just echoing Councillor Lavery's views, but I'm sure we'll see this application coming before us again very soon, maybe with 2.5 houses or something. No, I support it and move the officer's recommendation.
Yep. Don't forget to note the addendum, please. The changes on page 3 of the addendum and page 4. That needs to be included in there. It's amending the refusal reason 4. Okay, no noted. So we're proposing in and seconding that one. You okay with that? That was the point. Okay, formally proposed and seconded. Show of hands, please, in support of that one. That's everybody. Thank you. Now we're going to part 2.